The station shuddered as a streak of lightning slammed across the viewport. Sparks danced along the walls, and alarms screamed in a shrill chorus that rattled Nolan Vay's chest. He barely had time to steady himself before a warning flashed across his console. Atmospheric breach detected, Sector 4. His pulse hit a sprint as he scanned the readings. Something was falling toward the lab. Something alive. Before he could react, a blast of icy wind tore through the open airlock, carrying a screeching shriek that made Nolan stumble. A small shape tumbled across the floor. A hatchling, its scales glittering faintly like frost-covered glass, wings trembling, eyes wide with terror. Nolan froze for a heartbeat, then dove forward. The creature was tiny, no bigger than a Terran wolf pup, but it radiated something he couldn't name. Intelligence, fear, and curiosity. Hey, easy, Nolan whispered, scooping it up with gloved hands. Its claws scraped against his suit, and a pulse of heat shot from its mouth. Instinctively, he covered it with his jacket, careful not to touch its glowing scales. The hatchling shivered violently. Frost was forming along its back, melting into tiny rivulets that hissed when they hit the floor. Nolan's mind raced. The station's temperature was stable, life support holding steady, but this creature was unlike anything cataloged. He knew he couldn't just put it in a containment pod. It might freeze to death before he even had a chance to analyze it. He bolted toward the emergency medical bay, carrying it like a newborn. As he ran, the station groaned under the storm's assault. Outside the viewport, lightning arced over the planet's icy surface. Shapes moved in the shadows, massive and winged, leaving trails of sparks as they swept past the orbital shields. Nolan barely had time to register them. They weren't attacking, yet, but their presence was a warning. Something was watching. Something enormous. He slammed the hatchling onto a heated table and activated the containment field. The frost hissed and evaporated, but the creature didn't calm immediately. It curled its wings close to its body, trembling, and let out a soft, almost musical trill. Nolan knelt beside it, feeling a pang of something deep and human, responsibility, fear, awe. "This is incredible," he muttered. "You shouldn't even exist." The hatchling blinked slowly, studying him. Its eyes were luminous, pale blue, and they held a depth that unsettled Nolan. He had worked with alien specimens before, but none had ever seemed to look back like this, as if judging him, or trusting him. He scanned the readings again. Its vitals were stable for the moment, but the energy spikes from the storm were interfering with the station's sensors. Every time a bolt of lightning struck the planet below, the hatchling flinched, wings flaring. Nolan's jaw tightened. He had to keep it alive until he could understand it, until he could figure out what it was. The hatchling's shrill trill turned into a sharp, questioning chirp. Nolan leaned closer, squinting at the delicate patterns along its scales. They shimmered like frozen water but pulsed faintly with warmth. He touched the edge of a wing with his gloved finger. The creature recoiled, then relaxed, tilting its head as if testing him. A soft rumble made him freeze. He hadn't heard the station make that sound before. The hatchling stiffened. Nolan followed its gaze toward the viewport. A shadow passed across the stars, massive enough to blot out entire sections of the planet below. The hatchling hissed, a low, warning sound, and pressed itself closer to him. Nolan's heart thumped. He knew instinctively what it was. An adult. A parent. Or a predator. Something enormous, something capable of crushing the station without effort. And it was watching him. Watching the hatchling. Watching the choices he would make next. He had no time to hesitate. The station's alarms blared, the temperature dipped further, and the hatchling's scales flickered, warning of stress. Nolan wrapped it in a thermal blanket, murmuring, "I've got you. I won't let anything happen to you." The hatchling's trill softened, almost a sigh, and Nolan felt a spark of hope. But then the shadow moved again, closer this time, and the viewport trembled under a force that shouldn't have been possible. Nolan's stomach dropped. Whatever it wasn't going to wait. It had recognized the hatchling. And it wasn't patient. He glanced at the console. Oxygen levels, gravity stabilizers, shield integrity, all holding, for now. But for how long? The hatchling wriggled in his arms, wings beating faintly, and a tiny pulse of heat radiated from it. Nolan's mind raced. He had to protect it. And in that instant he knew, this wasn't just an accident. He had stumbled into something far bigger than a storm or a stray alien. Something alive, intelligent, and dangerous. A crackle of static burst over the comm system. A voice, not human, resonated, low and powerful, as if speaking directly into his mind. "Who dares touch her?" Nolan's breath caught. He froze, gripping the hatchling tighter. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The storm outside faded into silence. Only the hatchlings shivering and the rumble of the station remained. And then a massive silhouette filled the viewport. Its eyes, glowing like molten sapphire, locked on Nolan, and on the hatchling. Nolan swallowed hard. There was no going back. The shadow outside the viewport pulsed, its enormous wings stretching wider than the station itself. Nolan froze, the hatchling clutched tightly in his arms, scales flickering nervously. The creature's eyes, sapphire fires burning in the void, stared straight through him, and a low rumble vibrated the station's hull. Nolan realized with a jolt that it wasn't just watching. It was judging. The hatchling whimpered, and a tiny pulse of heat flared from its throat, frosting the edge of Nolan's gloves. He took a deep breath and held it. Calm, careful, decisive. He had no choice. If he panicked, the hatchling would sense it. If he hesitated, the massive creature outside might see weakness. "All right," he whispered, voice steady, "we need to learn. Together." The hatchling tilted its head, watching him, wings quivering. Nolan knew instinctively that this was more than a scared alien animal. It was the dragon princess, heir to a species he barely understood, and it would not survive without guidance. He moved quickly to the station's training bay. The small room was cluttered with tools and containment modules, none designed for something like this, but he improvised. Heat lamps, lightweight restraints, and holographic projectors became his classroom. He set the hatchling down, keeping his hands ready, watching its reactions closely. "Look," he said, holding out a holographic flame simulation. "Fire is dangerous if you don't control it. But it can also protect you." The hatchling hissed, smoke curling from its tiny nostrils, and flared a spark. The projection caught in the reflection of the lamps, bouncing light across the walls. Nolan ducked instinctively, heart hammering. Sparks hit the floor, sizzling. "Easy. Easy," he said, raising a gloved hand. He reached out slowly, letting the hatchling feel his calm. Slowly it relaxed. Sparks fizzled into harmless embers, and Nolan felt a surge of relief. Mini payoff, the first sign of trust. But the calm didn't last. Outside, the shadow shifted. The massive wings of the adult dragon, the Emperor, Nolan realized, beat against the station's shields, sending tremors through the floor. Alarms screamed warnings, structural integrity at 50%. The hatchling twitched violently. Nolan's stomach dropped. He had to act. "Follow me," he shouted. The hatchling scrambled, wings flaring as he led it to a simulated flight corridor, zero-gravity chambers lined with safety nets. Nolan had never trained an alien creature before, but human ingenuity demanded improvisation. "Flap like this," he demonstrated, waving his arms. "Use the currents. Feel the lift." The hatchling attempted a clumsy flap, colliding with the corridor walls. Sparks flew from a loose panel and Nolan lunged, steadying it. The creature looked at him, frustration and fear in its eyes. Nolan swallowed his own fear. He couldn't fail, not now, not ever. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning in the storm. The hatchling began to mirror his movements, small arcs of flight becoming smoother, more deliberate. Nolan's heart surged with a mix of pride and anxiety. Each successful lift was a tiny victory, but every failure reminded him of the stakes. One mistake and the station could collapse, the hatchling could burn, or the Emperor could intervene. Then came the unexpected. A pulse of psychic energy surged through the bay. Nolan staggered, gripping the railing. The hatchling froze, ears flattening. A deep, resonant voice filled the chamber, not words he could understand but meaning he could feel. It was anger, curiosity, and a warning all at once. The Emperor was speaking. And he was not pleased. Nolan's mind raced. If the Emperor attacked, the hatchling wouldn't survive, and neither would the station. But if he hesitated, the creature would sense weakness. He did the only thing he could. He communicated with the hatchling through calm presence and gestures, letting it mirror his courage. Together, they navigated the corridor, dodging falling debris and unstable equipment. Finally, the hatchling executed a controlled flame, not large but precise, contained, and deliberate. Nolan let out a short breath. The flicker of fire danced across the walls, harmless but perfectly measured. The creature's eyes met his, and for the first time there was recognition. They were partners. The Emperor's shadow shifted outside again, wings beating slower. The low rumble of disapproval faded slightly, replaced by something Nolan couldn't name. Respect? Curiosity? He didn't dare assume. But for a moment the impossible odds seemed to bend in their favor. And then the hatchling did something Nolan hadn't expected. It tilted its head, looked straight at him, and let out a trill, not frightened, not angry, but questioning. It was asking for more. Wanted to learn. And Nolan understood, sharply, that this small creature held the fate of an entire species in its tiny claws. A siren shrieked suddenly, louder than before. The station's shields flickered. A warning flashed. Orbital debris detected, breach imminent. Nolan's stomach dropped. The corridor walls shook. Sparks rained down. The hatchling leapt into his arms, scales flaring bright, wings beating furiously. Something was coming through the storm, something larger, faster, and far more dangerous than anything he had faced yet. Nolan's mind sharpened. There was no time for fear. No time to question if he could survive. He had a duty: protect the hatchling, teach it, and survive long enough to prove that a human could stand against beings far stronger, far older, and far more powerful. He tightened his grip, scanning the corridor, calculating the odds. "Hold on," he whispered. "We're not done yet. Not by far." Outside, a shadow streaked past the viewport, a shape massive enough to cast a black veil across the planet below. Nolan's eyes widened. Whatever it wasn't here to negotiate. It was here to test him. And Nolan realized with cold clarity that the storm was only the beginning. The station groaned as debris slammed against its hull. Sparks flew across the training bay and Nolan gritted his teeth, holding the hatchling tighter. Its scales shimmered, pulsing with heat and fear. Outside, the massive shadow of the Emperor lingered, wings slicing through the void with silent authority. Nolan knew every second counted. He set the hatchling down carefully. "You're stronger than you think," he said, voice calm but firm. "You can do this." The hatchling blinked, wings quivering. Its tail lashed the floor and a faint glow ran along its spine. Nolan realized it wasn't just responding to him physically, it was reacting emotionally. It understood more than any alien he had encountered. He had never faced intelligence like this. He activated a small holographic projector. Flames danced in simulated patterns on the floor, flickering like a miniature sun. "Mimic me," he commanded, demonstrating careful arcs of fire control. Not to hurt, only to speak. The hatchling hesitated. Sparks flared nervously from its mouth. Nolan held his ground, extending a gloved hand slowly. "It's okay. You can trust me. Just try." Then it happened. A trill, a soft, musical sound that Nolan thought was only a reaction, formed words. "Father." Nolan froze. The hatchling's voice was small, trembling, but unmistakably clear. The dragon princess was speaking. Not simple sounds, not mimicry, but language. Meaningful words. The station fell silent, every system suddenly insignificant against the moment. Nolan's mind raced. The Emperor outside, their colossal watcher, stirred, wings folding slightly as if drawn by the sound. The hatchling's voice continued, barely above a whisper. "I do not want to fight. I do not want to hurt. I only want to learn, with him." Nolan's pulse thundered. He realized this was no ordinary hatchling. This was the heir to an entire empire, speaking with intent, with thought, with emotion, and addressing the one being capable of teaching it. Him. He stepped closer, kneeling to meet the small creature's gaze. "You're doing it. You're learning, and you're safe." The trill grew slightly stronger, almost a song of sorrow and hope intertwined. Nolan understood the message. The hatchling was not just learning fire or flight, it was conveying empathy, reasoning, and understanding of right and wrong. This tiny creature was capable of bridging worlds. Outside, the Emperor shifted. The rumble of his presence softened into something Nolan had not expected: quiet reverence. The colossal alien who could destroy the station in a heartbeat paused to listen. Nolan realized the truth. The Emperor's greatest vulnerability was his daughter. And through her words he was now exposed to emotions no one had dared reach. A tremor ran through the station as Nolan recalibrated the training bay. Sparks from the earlier debris still hovered in the air, but he ignored them. He had to focus. "Try again," he urged, extending a hand. "Say it clearly. Let him hear." The hatchling repeated. "He is kind. He teaches. I trust him." A shiver ran down Nolan's spine. The Emperor's reaction was immediate. Outside, his wings quivered, then lowered slightly. A sound like a deep sigh rolled through the hull. Not aggression, not fury, but grief and pride mixed together. Nolan realized the Emperor was crying. Tears. A dragon millions of years old, reduced to emotion by his daughter's words. Nolan's mind raced. One small human, acting with courage and patience, had done what centuries of diplomacy and power could not. The hatchling had spoken the truth, and it had broken the barrier of fear and authority. But the moment of awe was short-lived. A warning flashed across Nolan's console. Approaching anomaly detected. High-speed object entering orbital corridor. The storm outside had not finished. Something else was coming, faster and far more dangerous than before. The hatchling shivered, eyes wide, and Nolan instinctively wrapped an arm around it. "We're not done," he said, voice firm. "Hold on. We'll get through this." Then came the unexpected. The hatchling's scales flared, glowing brighter, almost like molten sapphire. His trill shifted, urgent, commanding, almost desperate. Nolan realized it was trying to communicate a warning. Something in the approaching object was not just debris. It was intelligent, hostile, and it had noticed them. Nolan had no time to hesitate. "Listen to me," he said, eyes locked on the hatchling. "You trust me, right? Then follow me. I'll get us through this." He activated emergency shields, rerouted power to stabilizers, and grabbed a grappling tether. Every move was calculated, every second mattered. Failure was not an option. The approaching object tore past the station's exterior, shaking the hull violently. Sparks and panels rained down and the hatchling squealed. Nolan caught it, pressing it close, and felt a pulse of heat that almost burned through his gloves. Its wings flared automatically, pushing against the air, instinct and human guidance merging perfectly. Outside, the Emperor observed silently, wings spread wide but unmoving. Nolan could feel the weight of a billion eyes, centuries of power, watching a single human protect a tiny hatchling and teach it courage. And he realized something terrifying and exhilarating. If he failed, it wasn't just the hatchling that would be lost, it could trigger a war or collapse an empire. The hatchling's trill grew stronger, more precise. Nolan understood its meaning: trust, learn, survive. He mirrored its movements, weaving through the debris corridor, dodging the station's failing systems, guiding the princess with calm authority. And then, as they cleared the worst of the storm, Nolan realized the truth. He had done something no human had ever done. He had reached a dragon. Not just any dragon, but the future of an entire species. And the Emperor, watching silently, had felt it too. A soft hum vibrated through the hull. A new signal, distant but undeniable, pulsed from deep within the planet below. An alien frequency, intelligent and unknown. Nolan's stomach twisted. The storm was over, the hatchling had spoken, but the universe had just sent a new question. And Nolan knew without a doubt, the next danger would test them far beyond fire, flight, or courage. The new signal pulsed again, shaking the station's hull like an earthquake. Lights flickered, panels rattled, and Nolan's heart raced. The hatchling pressed against him, wings flaring instinctively. Whatever was coming wasn't just debris or a storm. It was intelligent, fast, and deadly. "Stay close," Nolan said, voice low but firm. "I've got you." He unstrapped a tether, anchoring himself to the station's floor. Every system was unstable now. Gravity fluctuated in pulses, giving the illusion of floating 1 second and crashing down the next. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the emergency lights struggled to stay on. The hatchling's scales glowed brighter, almost as if it could sense the threat before Nolan could. Outside, the Emperor remained, wings folded, eyes locked on the approaching object. Nolan had no idea whether it was friend or foe. He only knew that if the hatchling was endangered, the station would be torn apart in seconds. He made a choice. Humans survived by acting, not hesitating. He activated the bay's emergency flight harness, lifting the hatchling into a makeshift carrier. "We're flying," he said. "Now." The hatchling beat its wings tentatively, then stronger, flapping against the artificial wind currents Nolan generated with ceiling fans and thermal blasts. Sparks from damaged panels collided with the hull, and Nolan adjusted their trajectory with precise pulls on the tether. Each correction was a calculated risk. One wrong move and they would be crushed against the bulkhead. Then the approaching threat burst into view. A sleek alien craft, dark as the void, with edges that shimmered with energy. It darted toward them, faster than anything Nolan had ever seen. Its intent was clear. It was hunting the hatchling. Nolan's mind raced. The station's defenses were minimal, mostly designed for debris, not combat. He scanned the room, improvising. He grabbed a high-powered thermal welder and a reflective shield panel. "Cover me," he shouted at the hatchling. It chirped, flaring a pulse of heat that hit the hull, melting a nearby spark hazard harmlessly. With the welder in hand, Nolan angled the shield toward the incoming craft. Sparks and plasma arcs rebounded, slowing it just enough for them to maneuver. The hatchling's wings flared in tandem, generating a pulse of heat that added an unpredictable variable to the attack. The alien ship hesitated, surprised by the coordinated defense of a human and a hatchling. Nolan's pulse raced. He realized the station itself could be an ally if used smartly. He pulled the hatchling toward the zero-gravity training corridor. "Follow my lead. Trust me." The hatchling mimicked every flap, every motion. Together they weaved through debris, dodging the alien ship's energy blasts. Each movement was precise, calculated, and dangerously close to disaster. Suddenly, a panel exploded behind them, sending a cascade of molten metal toward the hatchling. Nolan lunged, grabbing it mid-flap, absorbing the heat through his suit. Its wings beat faster, stronger, instinct and trust merging. He felt something surge from it, a heat pulse more powerful than before. The hatchling was learning, adapting, not just surviving. The alien ship shifted tactics, attempting to block their escape route. Nolan's heart pounded, but he refused to panic. He guided the hatchling through a narrow ventilation shaft leading toward the station's observation deck. Sparks flew, the hull trembled, but they made it through. Outside, the Emperor shifted. Wings spread, massive claws scraping the station's exterior. He didn't attack directly but blocked the alien ship, using sheer size and presence to protect the hatchling. Nolan's eyes widened. The Emperor trusted him. The human. The mortal. And that trust gave Nolan the courage to act boldly. He turned back to the hatchling. "Time to fight smart," he said. "You've learned enough. Trust yourself." The hatchling beat its wings, generating a controlled pulse of fire. It wasn't wild or destructive. It was precise, aimed at the alien craft's energy emitter. Sparks erupted from the ship, and the alien pilot reeled, forced to retreat. Nolan felt a surge of triumph, but he didn't celebrate. The battle was only partially won. A sudden tremor shook the station. The alien ship's retreat had triggered instability in the outer hull. Nolan's vision blurred from the vibration. Panels fell, sparks flew, and the hatchling clung to him desperately. "Hold on," he shouted, using every ounce of strength to stabilize them both. Finally, after 10 seconds that felt like hours, the hull stabilized. The alien ship vanished into the void, retreating. Silence fell over the observation deck. Nolan's breath came in ragged gasps. The hatchling nestled against his chest, wings still beating, still glowing faintly. The Emperor's massive head appeared in the viewport. His eyes, molten sapphire, scanned Nolan and the hatchling. And then, slowly, he inclined his massive head in a gesture of acknowledgement. Tears, glimmering like molten metal, ran down his cheeks. Nolan felt a shock of emotion. He had done the impossible. A human had guided a dragon hatchling through disaster, earned the trust of the Emperor, and survived against impossible odds. The hatchling trilled softly, nuzzling Nolan's shoulder. Its eyes held understanding, respect, and gratitude. Nolan realized that their bond wasn't just survival, it was trust, mentorship, and courage. The small creature had learned, adapted, and chosen him as its teacher. Then a new hum reverberated through the station. It wasn't the storm nor the alien ship. It was deeper, resonant, coming from the planet below. A signal, intelligent and deliberate, pulsed through every system. Nolan's stomach sank. The storm was over, the battle won, but something bigger, older, and far more dangerous was awake. The hatchling shivered, wings flaring instinctively. Nolan's hand tightened around it. "We're not done," he whispered. "Far from it." Outside, the Emperor watched silently. Nolan understood the unspoken truth. Their struggle was only beginning. Humanity had proven courage, empathy, and ingenuity. But the universe had far greater challenges ahead. And somewhere below, the signal pulsed again, calling, waiting for a human brave enough to answer. The station's lights flickered as Nolan held the hatchling close. Outside, the Emperor's immense wings folded in quiet watchfulness, the colossal dragon surveying its domain like a living fortress. The hatchling pressed its head against Nolan's chest, scales warm, wings quivering in a mix of fear and relief. "You did it," Nolan whispered, voice hoarse from hours of shouting, directing, and surviving. "You controlled it. You trusted yourself. You trusted me." The hatchling trilled softly, a sound that felt almost like laughter, or perhaps pride. Its words from earlier echoed in Nolan's mind. "He is kind. He teaches. I trust him." Those words had shattered the Emperor's stoicism, revealing tears beneath scales millions of years old. Nolan marveled at how something so small had altered the course of an empire with honesty and courage. The Emperor's gaze, massive and molten, shifted toward the hatchling. A low, rumbling hum resonated through the station's hull. It was not anger. It was recognition, acceptance. Nolan realized with a surge of awe that the Emperor wasn't just acknowledging the hatchling, he was acknowledging him. A human. A single, mortal, imperfect human had earned the respect of the most powerful being in the sector. The hatchling lifted its head, trilling again. Nolan could feel the meaning: I will learn, I will grow, and I will protect. Because he showed me how. It was a declaration, simple yet profound, and Nolan felt tears prick his own eyes. Humanity had shined. Not through force, not through technology, but through courage, empathy, and intellect. Yet the universe was never quiet for long. From deep below the planet, the mysterious signal pulsed again. Nolan stepped to the observation deck, holding the hatchling on his shoulder. The pattern was clear now, deliberate, intelligent, and undeniably calling to them. Whatever waited beneath the planet's surface was older, faster, and more enigmatic than any threat they had faced. He glanced at the hatchling, whose eyes gleamed with understanding. We've survived today, Nolan said softly. But the universe, it's bigger than either of us imagined. The Emperor's massive head appeared again in the viewport. His eyes, molten sapphire like the hatchling's, lingered on Nolan. Then, in a gesture Nolan would never forget, the dragon lowered his head and touched the station's hull lightly with a claw, a mark of trust and acknowledgement. In one moment, the station, the human, the hatchling, and the Emperor were linked in an unspoken bond. Nolan exhaled, letting relief wash over him, but he knew better than to let his guard down. Every pulse, every spark, every rumble reminded him, the story was far from over. He had faced impossible odds and survived. He had taught, guided, and protected. Humanity had proven its worth in the eyes of creatures older and stronger than the stars themselves. But the galaxy held mysteries far beyond dragons and storms. The hatchling stirred in his arms. Its trill shifted, no longer fear, no longer hesitation, but something like anticipation. Nolan smiled. The bond they had forged, built in the crucible of fire and debris, had changed them both. He could feel the tiny creature's intelligence, its burgeoning power, and its unspoken promise to act with courage and wisdom. Nolan adjusted the hatchling on his shoulder, scanning the viewport. The planet below pulsed with the signal again. Whatever was sending it was patient, intelligent, and aware of them now. Nolan's heart quickened, not with fear but with determination. Humans thrived in the impossible. Humans acted when all seemed lost. And Nolan, a single human, was proof that courage could echo across empires. The hatchling trilled once more and Nolan understood. It wasn't just about survival. It was about change, growth, and the power of trust. He whispered, "We'll answer it together. One step at a time." Outside, the Emperor folded his wings fully, retreating into the void of space, but not leaving. He remained a sentinel, a reminder of the bridge Nolan had built. Humanity had not only survived, it had shaped the destiny of a species in a way nothing else could. A soft alarm chimed, bringing Nolan's attention to the station console. The signal was intensifying, pulsing faster, almost like a heartbeat. Nolan frowned. "This is bigger than anything we've faced," he murmured. "Something is waiting, and it knows we're here." The hatchling flared a tiny, controlled pulse of fire, scales shimmering in determination. Nolan felt pride, awe, and a surge of courage. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing: humans could rise to the challenge. They could face beings far older, stronger, and wiser, and emerge alive, wiser and victorious. He took a deep breath, clutching the hatchling to his chest. "Ready?" he asked. The small dragon's trill was firm, clear, and unhesitating. "Ready." Nolan turned toward the viewport, toward the pulsing light below the planet. The storm had passed. The hatchling had learned. The Emperor had witnessed. And now, a new adventure waited, one that would test every ounce of courage, intelligence, and heart they had left. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "The universe isn't finished with us. Not yet. Let's show it what humans can do." And in the shadows below, the signal pulsed once more, an invitation, a challenge, and a promise.